A doctor refuses to treat a patient, but he doesn't know that his son is. The story begins with a shocking twist. A well-respected doctor, someone who has spent years building his reputation and career, refuses to treat a patient. But what he doesn't know is that this patient is his own son. The opening sets the tone of tension and mystery. How could a doctor, someone whose job is to heal and help others, deny treatment to anyone, let alone a patient in need? The audience is immediately drawn in by the conflict between professional ethics and personal relationships. But there's more to this situation than meets the eye. The twist that will unfold reveals deeper emotional layers and leaves the audience questioning what's more important, professional duty or family loyalty. As we delve into the story, we'll explore the motivations behind the doctor's decision, the complex relationship between father and son, and how one single moment can change everything. The introduction teases the emotional journey that will unfold, one that challenges the values we hold dear. This isn't just about a medical decision. It's about understanding what drives us, what we sacrifice, and how the truth always has a way of coming out. By the end of this opening, viewers will feel the urgency of the story and be eager to learn what happens next. They'll be left wondering, how will the doctor react when he finds out who the patient really is? Will it be too late for reconciliation, or will this serve as an opportunity for healing? The stakes are high, and the emotional tension is palpable. What will the doctor do when he discovers the truth? The stage is set for an unforgettable revelation. The camera opens on a bustling hospital, white walls, nurses rushing down hallways, and the sound of footsteps echoing. It's a place where lives are saved daily, a place where patients come in, trusting that the medical professionals will help them. But for Dr. James, it's just another day at work. He's the kind of doctor who's been in the field long enough to have built a sterling reputation. His patients trust him, and he prides himself on sticking to the rules, professionalism above all. His decisions, always based on logic and the medical code, have never been questioned. But in this case, things are different. Dr. James walks into his office, reviewing patient files, his mind focused on the cases of the day. A nurse walks in, handing him a new file, but it's not just any file. It's a case he's been dreading. He opens the folder and scans the details. A young patient in need of immediate treatment. His condition is critical, requiring a procedure that Dr. James is known for doing well. The nurse looks at him expectantly, but he hesitates. Something about this case doesn't sit right with him. He knows there's something personal about this case. But the tension doesn't end with just the medical facts. There's a strange, unsettling feeling hanging in the air, as if fate itself is teasing the boundaries of professionalism and personal life. Dr. James turns to the nurse, refusing to treat the patient. He explains that the situation is too complicated, and it's beyond his expertise for this particular case. But the real reason is deeper, something only he understands and he refuses to reveal. The nurse is taken aback, questioning his decision, but the doctor stands firm, his mind made up. But little does he know, the patient he just turned away is about to walk in through the door, and he'll be faced with a shocking revelation that will turn everything upside down. As the scene progresses, we learn about Dr. James' past, his long-standing career, his reputation in the medical field, and his views on professionalism. He's the type of doctor who would never let emotions cloud his judgment. But what about when emotions are tied to family? The conflict between his sense of duty and his personal life begins to surface, and it sets the stage for a dramatic confrontation. The audience is left hanging on the edge of their seats, waiting for the moment when Dr. James finds out who his patient really is. His carefully constructed world is about to fall apart, and it's all because of one decision, a decision that's about to change everything. The hospital feels like it's holding its breath. The air is thick with tension as Dr. James stands at his desk, still holding the patient's file in his hand, eyes scanning over the details. His mind is racing. Everything in him is telling him to walk away from this case. After all, this isn't just another random patient. There's history here. The young patient in question, let's call him Alex, is suffering from a severe medical condition that requires immediate intervention. The file details are straightforward. The diagnosis is complicated, the procedure needed is risky, and it's going to take someone with a very specific skill set to handle it. But here's the catch. Dr. James knows exactly who Alex is. This isn't just any ordinary case. Alex is the son of someone from Dr. James' past. A past filled with unresolved emotions, regrets, and guilt. Years ago, a series of events led Dr. James to make a choice he's regretted ever since. That choice, that moment in time, set off a chain reaction, and now Alex's life hangs in the balance. The nurse, standing in front of him, senses something is off. "Doctor, the patient is ready. Should I prepare the oar?" she asks, her voice tentative, unsure if he's made a decision yet. Dr. James hesitates, shifting his gaze from the patient's file to the nurse's face, trying to keep his emotions in check. There's no room for mistakes here, not professionally, and especially not personally. His professional integrity has always been unshakable, but the personal turmoil he's feeling right now is something he's never had to confront in this way before. "No," Dr. James finally says, his voice low, as though the words physically hurt him to speak. "I'm not going to treat him." The nurse blinks in disbelief, clearly not understanding the full extent of his decision. "But doctor, this is a critical case. The procedure is within your scope. You've done this hundreds of times. Why not now?" Dr. James can feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His heart is beating faster now, his palms slightly clammy. "I said no," he repeats, his tone firmer. "I'm not the right doctor for this. We'll get someone else." The nurse is silent for a moment, taking a step back, unsure of what to make of this sudden shift in behavior. She knows Dr. James well, and this refusal doesn't make sense. It's not like him to back down from a challenge. In fact, his entire career has been built on his unwavering resolve to tackle even the most difficult of cases. So why this one? "Doctor, are you sure about this? You could save his life. This is your specialty." The nurse presses gently, her voice almost pleading. She knows the gravity of what he's deciding. Dr. James' mind races, but there's a coldness settling into his bones now, a feeling he's tried to ignore for years. The past is coming back to haunt him, and it feels like he's standing at the edge of a cliff. He can't help but wonder if this moment, this decision, is somehow karmic. Perhaps this is fate's way of testing him, forcing him to face the consequences of his past choices. "I can't be involved in this," Dr. James finally says, his voice tinged with something deeper. Resentment, fear, or maybe regret. It's hard to tell. The nurse nods slowly, still uncertain about what just happened. She leaves the office, leaving Dr. James alone with his thoughts. The doctor leans back in his chair, staring out the window, trying to steady his racing heart. He knows he's made a decision that will have massive repercussions. What he doesn't know is that this is only the beginning. The person he's refused to treat is about to walk in the door, and he has no idea that he's about to face the consequences of his actions head-on. And that's when it hits him. He realizes the full weight of what he's done. His refusal isn't just a medical decision. It's a personal betrayal. But what Dr. James doesn't know is that fate has already set the wheels in motion for a life-altering revelation. What he's about to face will force him to confront the very thing he's been running from. The past he can no longer ignore. As Dr. James sits there, his mind swirling with a mix of regret and uncertainty, the door to his office creaks open. A young man walks in, his face drawn with pain yet determined, as if he's been through 1,000 battles already. Dr. James doesn't immediately look up. He's still lost in his thoughts, wrestling with the decision he's just made. He knows the patient standing in front of him needs immediate care, but the emotional barrier is just too strong. "Dr. James," the young man speaks, his voice calm but firm. "You refused to treat me." The words cut through the air like a knife, and Dr. James finally looks up, his eyes meeting the young man's gaze. It's Alex, no longer the boy he once knew, but a grown man, standing tall before him. For a split second, Dr. James feels his heart skip a beat. He's frozen, trapped in the past, but his professionalism kicks in as he tries to maintain composure. "Alex," Dr. James begins, his voice thick with emotion. I I thought you were someone else. His words falter as the realization hits him. He's made a grave mistake. But Alex doesn't seem to care about the apology. His gaze is sharp, almost piercing, as he steps closer. You think this is about the past, don't you? He asks. His voice, although steady, carries a weight that Dr. James wasn't prepared for. It's not. Dr. James is taken aback. He had expected an outburst, anger, perhaps even resentment. But what Alex is saying doesn't align with what he'd imagined. There's something more here, something deeper, something Dr. James can't quite grasp. Alex continues, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable intensity. I'm not here for you to deal with my father's legacy. I'm here because I need you. I don't need your excuses. I don't need your guilt. I just need you to do what you're good at. Dr. James stands, his heart pounding in his chest. It's as if time itself has stopped. He feels like a man caught between two worlds, the one he's built for himself and the one he's tried so hard to forget. The words Alex is saying now are like echoes from a past he'd buried deep within himself. But now they're crashing into his present, demanding to be heard. You don't understand, Dr. James mutters, more to himself than to Alex. It's complicated. Alex's eyes narrow. It always is, he responds sharply. But life doesn't stop being complicated just because we wish it would. I need a doctor who will look past the history and save my life. His voice is laced with a mix of frustration and urgency. You're the only one who can do this. The weight of Alex's words lands hard on Dr. James. He feels the floor beneath him start to shift, his once firm foundation beginning to crack. Alex doesn't just want him to treat him as a patient. He wants him to face the truth, something Dr. James has been avoiding for far too long. A moment of silence hangs between them as Dr. James looks at Alex, the young man standing before him, not just as a patient, but as the son of the man who changed Dr. James' life forever. The past is no longer something Dr. James can ignore. He knows that whatever happens next will force him to confront everything he's been running from. Alex's eyes soften, and for the first time, a trace of vulnerability flickers in them. Look, I know you're scared, but I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here to make you pay for what happened. I just need a doctor, and you're the best. Dr. James is silent, lost in the weight of those words. How could he have been so wrong about this? The guilt from his past decision has been eating at him for years, and now, Alex is standing before him, a living testament to that decision. And yet, he's not angry. He's not seeking vengeance. He's just seeking help. Dr. James feels the walls around him begin to crumble, the excuses fading away. He realizes that he's been holding onto something that no longer serves him. The past, once a heavy burden, now seems like an obstacle he can finally move past. It's time to stop running. All right, Dr. James says, his voice steady now, the doubt in his eyes replaced by a newfound resolve. Let's do this. Alex nods, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Thank you, he says quietly, and for the first time in what feels like forever, Dr. James feels like he's made the right choice. The tension in the room begins to lift, but the journey ahead is far from over. Dr. James knows that this decision will change everything, not just for Alex, but for him as well. The past and the present have collided in a way he wasn't expecting, but now he has to face it head-on. The truth, it seems, has a way of coming to light when you least expect it. And for Dr. James, that moment is now. The decision Dr. James has just made weighs heavily on his chest. As he watches Alex walk out of his office, a flood of conflicting emotions surges within him. A part of him feels relief knowing he's made the right choice at last. But another part feels the sharp sting of guilt, wondering if this decision will truly be enough to undo the years of regret he's carried with him. The day stretches on, but the clock seems to tick slower than ever. Dr. James returns to his desk, his mind racing. Every moment spent not facing the truth about what happened years ago feels like a missed opportunity. An opportunity to make amends, to rebuild what's been broken. But how can one man, one doctor, undo all the damage caused by a single decision? Just a few hours earlier, Dr. James had been so sure of himself, convinced that he was right in refusing to treat Alex. But now, with Alex gone and the weight of the past pressing down on him, Dr. James feels the cracks in his defenses widening. The choice to refuse treatment wasn't just about what was right in the moment. It was about all the pain and resentment that had built up inside him over the years. But the consequences of his decision are not just personal. As Dr. James soon realizes, the decision he made in that office will reverberate beyond the walls of his practice. He may have thought he was protecting himself, but in reality, he's now forced to confront the bigger consequences of his actions. The following morning, Dr. James receives a call from the hospital administration. It's a brief conversation, one that hits him like a thunderclap. Dr. James, the voice on the other end of the line, says, "We've received a complaint, a very serious one. The refusal to treat a patient based on personal bias. This is not something we can overlook." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Dr. James feels his stomach drop. He thought the issue with Alex was contained, just a simple misunderstanding that could be brushed aside. But this complaint is different. It's official. It's real. The hospital now has a duty to investigate. As the days pass, the situation spirals out of control. The complaint about Dr. James spreads beyond the hospital, picking up steam in local news. It doesn't take long for the story to hit social media, where the backlash is swift and brutal. Dr. James watches as his reputation, carefully built over decades, begins to crumble. The calls from journalists, the messages from patients, everyone wants to know why he refused to treat Alex. And everyone seems to have an opinion on what that refusal says about him as a doctor and as a man. For the first time, Dr. James begins to understand the true cost of his decision. It's not just his job that's at risk. It's his entire career, the trust he spent years building with his patients, and even the relationships with his colleagues. What seemed like a momentary lapse in judgment has now become the defining event of his life. With the pressure mounting, Dr. James is forced to make an important choice, whether to stand by his original decision or to publicly acknowledge his mistake. The hospital has given him an ultimatum. Either he steps down voluntarily, or they'll take further action. The investigation will continue regardless, and there's a good chance that even if he keeps his job, his credibility will be forever damaged. The thought of losing everything, his reputation, his career, and the respect of his peers, leaves Dr. James feeling hollow. But in the quiet moments, when he's alone, his mind keeps returning to Alex. He thinks about the young man's words, "I'm not here for revenge. I just need you to do what you're good at." Dr. James is struck by the simplicity of it. Alex had no hidden agenda. He wasn't trying to force Dr. James into a corner or get back at him for the past. He just needed the help that only Dr. James could provide. But now, as the consequences of his decision unfold, Dr. James knows that the real challenge is not just about facing the public backlash. It's about understanding what kind of man he wants to be moving forward. As the investigation proceeds and the hospital administration takes action, Dr. James is left grappling with a profound sense of guilt. He's not just a doctor in this moment. He's a human being who made a mistake, who hurt someone, and who has to reckon with the fallout of that mistake. It's a humbling experience, one that forces Dr. James to confront the cost of his decisions. Not just for himself, but for those he's impacted. Alex may have been the catalyst for his awakening, but the true consequences of the refusal are far-reaching, touching every aspect of Dr. James' life. For the first time, he realizes that the road to redemption is long, and it may not even lead to the outcome he's hoping for. But one thing is certain: he cannot undo what's been done. What he can do now is learn from it, make amends where possible, and try to be the kind of doctor and the kind of person he has always aspired to be. As Dr. James sits in his office, his hands trembling from the weight of his recent decisions, the room suddenly feels smaller, suffocating. His thoughts are consumed by the backlash from the hospital administration, the media, and the growing list of patients voicing their disappointment. But amid the overwhelming pressure, something unexpected happens. A phone call, a call he did not anticipate. It's a number he doesn't recognize, but something compels him to pick up. Dr. James, the voice on the other end, says, "It's calm but firm, like someone who has already accepted the reality of the situation. This is Alex's father, the man whose son you refused to treat. For a moment, Dr. James is silent. The name hits him like a wave crashing over him, and his mind instantly flashes back to that moment in the clinic when he had denied Alex medical attention. He expected anger, resentment, maybe even accusations. But the voice on the phone doesn't carry any of those emotions. Instead, there is an odd calmness, an underlying understanding. "I'm not calling to argue with you," the man continues. "I'm calling to share something with you. Something you don't know. Something about my son that you never took the time to learn. This is it." The moment Dr. James has feared. He braces himself, expecting some revelation that might further condemn him for his earlier actions. But the story that unfolds over the next few minutes is not what he anticipates. "My son, Alex, has always been more than what you saw in that office," Alex's father begins. "He's been through more in his life than most people can even begin to understand. But there's one thing he never told anyone. Something he kept hidden, not out of shame, but because he didn't want it to define him." Dr. James feels a knot tighten in his chest. He's confused, unsure of what Alex's father means. What could possibly be more important than the immediate need for treatment that Alex came to him for? "It's about his medical history," Alex's father says softly. "My son was diagnosed with a rare condition when he was young, something that the medical community still doesn't fully understand. A condition that, until recently, no one knew could be hereditary." Dr. James feels his pulse quicken as the words sink in. This is not what he was expecting. His mind races, trying to make sense of it all. Could this have anything to do with why Alex had been seeking medical attention? "He never wanted anyone to know," Alex's father continues, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "He didn't want to be treated differently. He didn't want sympathy or special treatment. But you need to understand, he was never just a patient to be turned away. He was struggling with something much bigger than what you saw." At this point, Dr. James feels his world start to tilt. His mind is reeling, trying to piece together the new information. For years, he's operated under the assumption that he knew his patients, that he could make judgments based on their symptoms, their history, their needs. But what Alex's father is telling him goes against everything he's ever believed about patient care. He has failed to see the person behind the medical chart, the complexity of their lives, the untold stories. "I understand why you made the decision you did," Alex's father adds quietly. "I get it, but I want you to know, if you had known the whole story, if you had known what Alex had been through, you might have made a different choice. Maybe you would have been there for him instead of pushing him away." Dr. James feels a cold shiver run down his spine. The guilt that had been gnawing at him grows even more intense, seeping into every part of him. The image of Alex, standing in front of him, pleading for help, suddenly feels like a distant memory, one that is now overshadowed by this new, painful revelation. "But there is more. There's something else I need to tell you," Alex's father continues. "Alex is not just a patient. He's my son, and the condition he's been dealing with has been passed down to him from me. It's genetic, and now, he's been trying to help me just like you help your patients. He wants to change the world, to make things better for people like us. He doesn't want to hide anymore." The weight of Alex's father's words hits Dr. James like a freight train. He's been so focused on his own decisions, his own mistakes, that he never considered the bigger picture, the personal, emotional battle that Alex and his family were facing. He never considered what was at stake for them, beyond the surface of medical treatment. The silence hangs heavy between the two men. Dr. James feels himself unraveling, realizing how wrong he had been in making a snap judgment without knowing the full context. Alex's story, his battle, his family's struggle. This was all far more than just a case for treatment. It was a life, a family, and a future. In that moment, Dr. James understands that medicine is never just about the treatment. It's about the people, their stories, their pain, and their humanity. And now, he is confronted with the harsh truth that he has failed to see it all. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Alex's father says, his voice softer now. "But I hope you understand now. It's never just about what you can do as a doctor. It's about understanding the person behind the illness. It's about seeing the whole story. As the conversation ends, Dr. James is left to process the weight of what he's just heard. He has been given a glimpse into the depth of Alex's life, and now, more than ever, he understands how his refusal to treat Alex wasn't just a mistake in medical judgment. It was a failure to see the humanity in the person standing before him. In the coming days, Dr. James will have to face the consequences of his actions, but more importantly, he must confront the emotional and ethical journey that lies ahead. What he learned from Alex's story is not something that can be easily fixed. It's something that will stay with him, reshaping the way he practices medicine, and perhaps the way he lives his life moving forward. In the days that follow the call, Dr. James is a changed man. The once confident, self-assured doctor now finds himself haunted by a deep sense of remorse. He has been forced to confront the harsh truth that he judged Alex too quickly, without understanding the complexities of his life. Each time he thinks back to that moment when Alex stood in front of him, pleading for help, a pang of guilt tightens in his chest. Dr. James knows he cannot undo what has been done, but he also understands that healing cannot begin without taking responsibility for his actions. He makes the decision to reach out to Alex's father and, if possible, to speak directly to Alex. It's not about seeking forgiveness. It's about acknowledging the pain he has caused and offering something more meaningful than just an apology. It's about reconciliation. The day comes when Dr. James, with nervous anticipation, visits the family home. As he steps into the modest living room, Alex's father greets him with a solemn nod. There's a moment of awkward silence before Dr. James speaks, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've come to apologize," he begins. "I cannot take back what I did, but I can promise you that I will never make that mistake again. I failed you and your son, and I will live with that every day for the rest of my life. But I hope, someday, I can make it right." Alex's father looks at him, and for a moment, it feels like the weight of the world rests in the silence between them. Then, slowly, Alex's father speaks. "You may not be able to fix what happened," he says, "but you've done something more important. You're here. You're taking responsibility. And that means a lot. For Alex, for me, for us." As Alex enters the room, the atmosphere shifts. The tension that once existed between them begins to dissipate, replaced by something more fragile but powerful: hope. Alex, who had been through so much, looks at Dr. James, not with anger, but with an understanding that transcends words. In that moment, Dr. James realizes that true healing doesn't always come from medicine. Sometimes, it comes from the courage to admit mistakes and the willingness to make amends. It is the first step toward emotional reconciliation, a lesson that will stay with him forever. What would you do if you found out that the person you've wronged is connected to someone you've always cared about? Would you own up to your mistakes, or would you walk away and let the past define you? Dr. James had to face this very dilemma, and the impact of his decision was life-changing for both him and Alex. It's a powerful reminder that we all have the ability to make things right, no matter how much time has passed. But what do you think? Was Dr. James's attempt at reconciliation enough to undo the harm he caused? Or could there have been more he could have done? Was Alex right to forgive him, or did he overlook a deeper injustice in the process? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your perspective because stories like this don't just belong on the screen. They belong in real conversations, where we can learn from each other and grow together. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in the power of second chances. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a story that will make you think, feel, and reflect. Every week, we dive deep into real-life stories that challenge our perceptions of right and wrong, justice and forgiveness. So, if you're ready to be inspired and shocked, stay with us. Your next moment of reflection could be just around the corner. Let us know. How do you handle mistakes in your life? Do you believe that true reconciliation can only happen when we fully understand the pain we've caused? Let's keep this conversation going.